My job is going to be not only to try to keep you guys engaged in the specifications in the afternoon. It's not the most lively subject, so I'll try to make it as enjoyable as I can. It's a topic that I've become pretty interested in, spent a lot of time studying, put together a team we'll talk about, trying to really understand the relationships of specifications today, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. But the key of everything is that people are really looking to make business more efficient, which obviously would lead to cost reductions through the whole chain. We'll talk about that. But what they tend to do is jump past the specification, past what I call the DNA of the specification, and try to get things done today without solving the core problem. And that's really not resulting in sustainable and improving business conditions and efficiencies. So that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time on today. And then have the ending, we're going to talk about questions and answers. The first thing I did a couple years ago is said we've got to kind of whiteboard it. You know, today we've got ourselves to a place that's pretty complex. If you think about it, not even that long ago, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, you could kind of put a product in any sort of interior packaging, put in kind of any box you want, put on whatever pallet you want, and use whatever logistics systems you wanted. Today, that's not the case. Today, you have to have very specific packaging. You have a lot more regulation today. The retailers in the channel are coming back and they're getting stronger in obviously the end result and the end outcome. And the trend we're going towards is greater complexity. The consumer today, as we've seen, is starting to have a lot more influence on what products are out there and the packaging that the product's going into. And quite frankly, the visibility and the awareness of what's being used, how it's being used, where it's being procured from. So we had a whiteboard, you know, and I liken to this. If you think about your TV viewing years ago, you had one kind of, 20 channels and one VCR. And I think the way we solved the specification SKUzilla is by adding 50 VCRs today to handle the 1,000 channels and hiring a couple kids to manage all those VCRs. Instead of scrapping it, bringing technology in to try to figure out what's the right way to manage specification explosion. And so what we had to do is look at it from all different directions. Couldn't just look at it from a vendor or a user case, because that wouldn't create this great value through the chain, this great cost reduction that we want to experience. So we had to really understand what technology could bring us. I brought 20 plus years of vendor background, really understood the supply side, what's valuable to that part of the equation, but we needed to understand the technology side. So I engaged a gentleman by the name of Dave Molenhoff. Dave was one of the first 3 founders of Salesforce. He's also the CTO of Salesforce, developed the code today which really drove the CRM system, revolutionized the cloud. He's one of the revolutionaries. Kind of an interesting guy to be around because he's a quiet guy, and you go around technology people and they want to get his autograph. He doesn't really know how to handle that. We also had to understand what technology, once that was done, what the right stuff to put in the system is. Where is packaging going? What's the future of packaging? And that's really figured out a lot in academia. And so I enlisted Jay Singh, who's the director of Cal Poly Packaging Program, a great benefit and ally to the team. And then we brought several clients into the process. And over a course of a year, we versioned at least 20 times. And we're talking about technology and versioning, and I'll get a little bit further in there. So you got to look at it from a totally different sphere. You got to wipe away how it's being done today and kind of re-blueprint it. And the 2 things that really come away as the most critical in that process is you have to have great intelligence, and doesn't necessarily mean IQ, but intelligently manage, and I'll explain that. And it has to be real time. A lot of systems today are kind of what I call dead systems. The documents are out there, they're not transposable, they're not usable because they're not real time. And another way to look at that word is live. The data needs to be live. Intelligently means taking complex things and simplifying the process. So when you look at a solution, you have to know, is it intelligently solving this problem, and is the problem being resolved real time? And if you don't capture, you don't take care of those 2 things, you will never fix the core problem, which we're going to talk about. And so those 2 things are critical when building a specification management system. And it's really kind of started this new movement, which is specification data management. And it goes well beyond packaging. Just as a company, we're already into ingredients, clients' products, some other stuff going on. But for today, obviously at Pack Expo, we're going to focus in on packaging because that's the core of everything. So it creates this new sphere called specification data management, and we're starting to really study that world. So we really have to understand, why are we not being efficient today? What is the concerns? What are people not comfortable with their data? Why are they not comfortable? What are they concerned with their data doing to them? And so we went out and surveyed. A lot of this information that I'm going to share today isn't out there readily available because nobody's really studying it yet. We're on the forefront of trying to study it. So we went out to 130 plus major companies and asked them, why are you concerned about your data? What inhibits you from being highly effective? And then we ranked them and obviously said how many people are concerned about failures and defects. Obviously a resounding number of people were worried about that. They're worried about the data that's out there in the system is not what they need or not correct. And that really stops a lot of efficiency in the chain for everybody. And that's another thing I should say. This solution of really looking at specification data management is solving everybody's inefficiencies issues. It's not a one-off problem. That's why I share so much. The more and more people become experts in this and create these types of solutions, the system will work very well with everybody. So we need to solve that. Obviously, everybody would agree when buying packaging that they pay too much. I mean, it's a resounding opinion by everybody. We're pretty safe in that one today. The packaging companies probably wouldn't agree, but everybody agrees packaging is a lot, and it's getting higher. We studied, it's an interesting study. Nobody can really tell you how many specifications there are in the country, never mind the world. We performed a study, initiated a study, somewhere around 60 million specifications in the United States alone. There's over 200 million in what I'd say the advancing world economy, and that's growing at a change rate of 30% a year with a 10% attrition rate. So what that's saying is that those numbers are on a very fast pace, somewhere around 22% a year. That's how fast those specs are growing. So that doesn't help reduce costs. The more complexity of the specs, the more specs you got, the lower volumes maybe you have, that starts to cause, obviously, price inflation. And then you go through the other type of issues or problems out there, and you skip down a couple to keeping track of approved specifications and artwork. For those that don't know, a great philosophy of trying to create specification data management, it says that versioning is dead. Versioning was a bad idea when it started. It got even worse with technology. Technology has been very negative to versioning. And you wonder why. And if you think back 20 years ago when everything was in nice binders and file cabinets, if you remember back then, and you had one kind of quality manager that would assign you a book and threaten your life if you got rid of anything without him knowing about it or copy anything, versioning control kind of worked then. Specification populations were down in the couple million, so it all kind of worked. The problem with technology and versioning today is obviously email. When an email leaves your desk, you don't know how many times, you can trace it now, but you don't know how many times that's going to be copied. And if you want to hit the stop button and recall all that, yeah, you get the nice recall message, but it doesn't recall, right? And therefore, you got to wonder how many hundreds of people have that bad spec. And even if 99 of them delete it, which is pretty good odds that that's going to happen, you still got one bad spec out there. So versioning's gone. We're going to talk about technology going forward. What I liken it to is you take a spec, you hang it in the cloud, and you do everything from that spec. You look at it and you do business around it, and you never duplicate it, and you never change it, and it goes back into history versus versioning, which causes problems. So you go through all these problems that really don't allow efficiency, and you see the next one is vendor reliance. And what that means is we've kind of started to say we're everybody's friend. We're really a neutral ground. We're trying to explain and understand this dynamic changing place. But people feel like they're kind of stuck to some vendors because all the data isn't quite there. It isn't in a good technical form that they can touch it. And so that creates this unhealthy relationship in their opinion. And then you go on down the line, and most of them you probably have some opinion on, and you might rank them differently. But in general, those are the ones that keep you from being efficient in business today. So we want to try to, change all that, right? If you're really going to create this great efficiency through the whole chain, that starts at the vendor, through the user, through the client, through the retailer, through the consumer, and that's what we're studying, how to do that. We've got a piece of it done now. That's going to have to go away. Those will have to be issues of old issues. It's interesting when I was walking through and saw all the robotics. I kind of had to laugh because I was thinking the solution that we've kind of taken in specification management is forget robotics, don't even think about it. Let's just add more people and let's add more supervisors to it. And you'll start to see now companies are creating specification data management teams. Well, let's solve the problem and use technology to do that and become more efficient. So that leads into, well, what are people using? A lot of people are using different systems, so that's why you don't see this doesn't add up to 100. They're using different systems for different issues. That's another thing we're going to talk about. The data needs to be in one place. But it's kind of, if you break it down into two main buckets, one I'd say is kind of homemade tools, which would be Excel work files, documents. It's interesting when we work with the venture community that backs us and all that, they can't believe that the amount of spreadsheets that are still being used in PDFs today. And that's the reality is that's really the engine of what's still driving things. And then the secondary piece of it is ERP, PLM, MRP systems. Systems that are very good at what they do, and we actually cohabitate and like to link them together, that are very good at what they do, but they weren't built 20 years ago to deal with this crazy implosion of specifications out there today. But they're kind of hobbled together and create some sort of solution. But 76% in the survey said that they're somewhat satisfied to dissatisfied. They're not happy. It's kind of getting them by. It hasn't caused great train wrecks yet. They're kind of managing it. They're holding on, hoping that nothing happens. So then you have to start to dig into the DNA. What's the DNA of a spec that's critical? And we list the real high-level elements, and then there's a lot of trees that branch off all these. And not everybody, when you define a specification, would believe that these are all part of a specification. But remember, the process is how can we create efficiency through the system? It's not just how we're going to make that PDF a fancier PDF. So the first thing that is super critical today as you talk about this non-versioning world that we're heading towards is BOMs, bill of materials, or families, as we call them. We first started the architecturing of this, and we messed up a little bit, and we did a one-to-one family relationship. And that started to create this problem, bottleneck down the road. So we switched it, and you have to have a one-to-many family relationship. And what that basically means is you have one specification for the cap that's used in 40 different bottle applications. And that, once again, that specification for the cap never gets versioned again. It rather gets linked or connected through technology to the rest of the specifications. And therefore, when your vendor decides they're no longer going to carry that plastic, no longer wants to make that throat, whatever that issue is, you can change that and know the impact where it's all going to impact instantaneously. And you can change it instantaneously. And then you can notify the world that it's changed instantaneously. So that's critical. That's kind of where the foundation starts. And now, kind of our architecture, not to get too far, is we're actually starting to bring ingredients in and starting to create recipes and the packaging that goes with it. And some of the clients out there today, with clients in Sweden and other places, are looking at it as one BOM and then splitting all those ingredients or all those parts out to all the various BOMs through technology. Dimensioning. Oh, I got the dimensions. They're on my CAD file. My vendor faxed it over to me the other day. I've got them. Well, they're not intelligent. They're not telling you things. They're not embedded in technology. They don't help you do quick analysis. We just released a like item finder at the show today, and we're doing some demonstrations for some of our own clients, and they're shocked at what we're finding in their SKUs, and we're trying to limit the SKUs. Then you go down, obviously, there's a lot of the other ones you would expect, graphics, the type of material, but deeper than just the material. I know it's this kind of poly, or I know it's this 200 test, but what's that comprised of? Because when you get alternative ideas and alternative testing, and you want to really test the product and see if you're too heavy, a lot of it just came by accident, kind of where we're at. And you really want to understand that and dissect it and have intelligence running, you got to really dissect that data. The more data, like any intelligence, the better it's going to run. Some of the different attributes that are not always known is the vendor information. Who's approved to do what? Can you make those decisions instantly when one vendor fails or can't get you what you need? Can you instantly hit a button and transfer to another one? Do you know who that is? Do you know when that is? If you have allowed a vendor to have a certain different spec to appease them and maybe get some sort of cost advantage? Is that technology, is that in there? Or is it just kind of in the brain, well, they get away with that? Or do you have a way to really find out what everybody's doing and judge them against what they're doing? And we're going to talk about audits, but there's a real life kind of supply audit that goes on behind the scenes constantly, pinging the data. That's critical. And then you look at some other areas. You look at inbound. That's always kind of stored somewhere else. Well, how do you want the product in all your different facilities or factories? And maybe it's different product come in different ways. We were walking a 1 million square foot warehouse one day, and there's a lot of dead pallets, and I asked what the problem was, and it was because the height of the pallets weren't correct. So they created this 50,000 square foot warehouse to kind of rework the 1 million square foot process flow instead of fixing the problem that was leading to that problem, right? So that's very important. And then the one that's really critical today is the outbound spec. What retailer is it for, if it's going to a retailer or OEM, or where is it going in the value chain, and what is their expectations? And why that's important is twofold. When they call and want to know some information, you can instantly share it with them. You don't have to recreate it. You don't have to go around asking. You just send it to them. And then also past that, if you have a change at a major retailer, how much time and energy does it take you to go through and figure that out versus just calling it all up? Here's Walmart spec, have the change made, and it repopulates through technology. So those are the critical kind of DNA elements. Then what do you want to do with it? You know, once you've got the data, I'd say some people have got great data, but can you do these three things with it? You have to today to be able to analyze your data. That's key. That's what we built all the intelligence off of. Is you want to be able to do analytics instantly. You want to know what's working, what's not working, what's most cost effective. Eventually, we'll help with currency swings to instantly tell you what's going to happen if you make changes in supply destinations or locations. What's happening in the retail shelf. You look at audits and sharing. You want to be able to share. We're going through a system that everybody shares, right? How easy is it to share and have different levels of awareness and sharing, right? You obviously have different awareness for the retailers, different than your internals, different than your co-packers, but you can instantly share that data that's sitting out there. No longer email trails looking for something, right? And sharing back and forth. And then the last and the most important of those three elements is auditing. I've always believed if the system gets dirty, it will dilute the value of the product, right? So you have to have proactive ways to ping the data, and data can be intelligent. Data can tell you there might be something wrong. It's not been looked at for a while. The vendor, we have a proactive vendor tool that goes out and says, just tell us this is what you're running today. Nobody's touching it. The system's doing this. The system's looking at dimensioning relationships. Is that right? Could it be wrong? Flagging it, right? Intelligently doing it, not manually doing it. That's what we're trying to do. And then there's manual intervention to say yes and no, but how much better spend your time on that than trying to do the whole thing. And then obviously audits that are being done maybe in your own facilities. Is it being captured? Is it being captured on the spec? Is that history being drawn there together through, so we have people in the fields or on packing lines on their iPads or whatever, putting information from the quality checks into the spec system. And then how do you build it? What's the foundation of which to build it? And the only answer today is SaaS. We can debate a lot of things. That's one we can't. It's really extremely flexible. It's extremely analytical. It can be accessed anywhere in the world today. You talk about security, big buzzword with all the email problems we have out there in the public today. You notice only emails generally get hacked. Security is very high, higher than banking level security. You rarely hear of the big 5 SaaS players having a problem with their data. So that, and then it's scalable, and you pay for it as you go. That's the other thing. The days of spending millions of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for solutions is over. It's really the concept of leasing a car and getting to turn that car in every 2 years and get the next best thing. The versioning on SaaS is constantly. We're on 25, 26 versions right now. Another 4 or 5 will come out in the next couple months. That's the benefit that you get from renting or leasing versus buying. So I'm not going to go through these in great detail, but these are kind of the elements down to the left that you should be able to do with technology today. How to manage your specifications. Those are some of the attributes and things. The things across the top are the things you're going to want to do quickly. You want to do them efficiently. You want them to be going on when you're not paying attention. You want a dashboard when you come in that tells you everything that's going on in your packaging specification world. You want to know what audits have happened, what the results of those audits are. You want to use your time very proactively as a manager of your business. Instead of trying to chase things, you're running your business from what I call a dashboard. It's like running a plane, right? You're touching the key points. And so, in wrapping up, if our solution and the solution you bring as you study this, and I encourage everybody to do it, it's to me, fascinating discussion. It's not great for everybody. As you study it, start to understand where am I at in that chain, and start heading towards using some technology to get you to a better place and create great efficiency through the DNA of specifications.